Welcome back to Bad Attitude C10. Alright guys, I'll explain what's going on here in just a little bit, but we're going to jump right into this video. Alright guys, since I'm out in the shop real quick, I figured I would go ahead and clean this up and tap the hole in it. So we're not going to be using the crankcase ventilation system that usually has a tube off the throttle body. We're just running an evac straight over to a catch can. So after removing all that hideous JB weld they welded that tube into the throttle body with, I went on ahead and prepped the throttle body and we drilled it so we could tap it 8-inch national pipe thread, or 8-inch MPT. And guys, I know y'all are probably wondering why I keep stopping and pulling the tap out and rinsing it or cleaning it and starting again. It's aluminum, and I just want to try to keep as much trash from, hurting threads or anything to get a good, nice, clean set of threads in. So, if y'all think it's a bit excessive, oh well, hey, it's mine, and as always, I'm going to do it the way I want. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this. Instead of having a tube sticking out with a rubber grommet on it, I'm going to actually put a pipe plug in it. And since I'm out here in the shop already and have the stuff, instead of hauling everything in the house, I'm just going to knock it out real quick. So as usual, since it is pipe thread, we are going to put some thread sealer, kooky, whatever the heck you want to call it. And I could probably get one at a later date that would actually be the countersinking flush style instead of having a head stick out. But I still think that looks far better than having a tube sticking out of it with the rubber grommet on it. So I'm just going to let it roll like that and call it done. So I tried the video whenever we took the throttle body apart. As you can tell, we did have a V-band TIG welded to it. I thought the camera was on. It was. It didn't say anything about not having an SD card in it. And I guess the last time that I uploaded pictures or video, I took the card out of the camera because the new computer didn't have the software to do it from the camera. So I have an SD card reader. I just stick in there and do it that way. I didn't put a card back in. So when I disassembled this throttle body that I picked up on Marketplace because somebody had drilled an idle air control hole in it because they didn't have an IAC on it, and instead of having an automatic air control and they were hunting and couldn't get it to idle properly, they drilled a hole in the throttle blade, and then when they figured out what they were doing wrong, they put JB weld all over it. It's a $500 throttle body. I got it for 120 bucks. I had spoke to the company that used to make the throttle bodies, and they said they'd have parts that I could purchase from them. But after reaching out and contacting them 3 or 4 different times, I've just never had a chance to get the parts. So I took the blade out. We had the blade hole TIG welded instead of having JB weld on it. Went on ahead and pulled the throttle shafts out to check the bushings and the bearings. They're actually sealed bearings, so they look good still, so I'm gonna put them back in. So we cleaned it up. Stewart Stainless in Lacey Lakeview, Texas did help us out and welded this and gave me a discounted price for doing that. Which brings us to today, and as I mentioned before, the brass plug that we put in there, it was acceptable at the time that we did it, but I really do think one that countersinks would look better. So this is what we're going to go with. It's an inverted Allen. So after doing a test fit, we did go ahead and get some thread sealer out, as you can see here, and applied it because it is pipe thread. And as I expected, that looks a whole lot cleaner. So that's what we're going to roll with. Up next, I needed to put the throttle blade bushings, or sealed bearings is actually what they are, back in. And I didn't have any bearing drivers that small, so I just had to kind of roll with the punches and use what I could find. So I'm going to go ahead and install these bearings, and after I install the bearings, I'm going to stake them in with a spring-loaded center punch. So here we go. So up next, we'll put in the throttle shaft, or the throttle blade shaft, the throttle body shaft, whichever one you want to call it. So I didn't have any grease handy, but I did have some gun lube that we use on boat carriers of the AR-15s when we assemble them. And so I'm going to go ahead and lube it up with that. Now be sure one side of your rod is notched for your TPS or your throttle position sensor, and be sure you insert this the proper direction. Once we cleared the first bearing, I went and grabbed a socket that would clear the shaft that I could put to support the other bearing. That way we didn't drive it out of the throttle body. And using a nylon hammer, I drove it through until it came up high enough to get the C-clip on, or external snap ring, whichever way you want to call it. Once that was done, I again used the nylon hammer, and I went on ahead and drove the shaft back the opposite direction to get it centered in the throttle body. And then I made sure everything moved freely. With the shaft now being centered and in place, I went on ahead and started grabbing the pieces to where I could assemble the shims, the spring, and the crank back onto the throttle shaft. Now guys, this is my first rodeo with the throttle body, so I did what I normally do when taking something apart I'm not familiar with. I took a picture of the throttle body and how the spring arrangement and everything is when I took it apart. That way when I went back to put it together, if I forgot anything, I could kind of glance at the picture. So once I got the bell crank on, I had to use the nylon mallet again to tap it down. Now this thing is already under spring pressure, but I have a small set screw that goes into a divot on the throttle shaft, so I'm going to have to get that aligned. So to be a little smarter than what I was working with, I removed the set screw so I had the access hole and I could see the divot in the shaft. I used a pair of Knips, I guess you can say channel locks that are smooth bore, and a punch. And what I did was I inserted the punch in the hole, and then using the channel locks, I rotated the shaft until I could feel the divot. After double checking my alignment, I applied some blue Loctite. Now guys, I use blue just in case in the future I ever need to replace a spring or anything. It'd be a lot easier to get off than if I would have used red. After double checking the function and making sure the shaft moved clearly and everything was centered, it was time to move forward to our throttle blade. Now our throttle blade had been TIG welded where they originally had drilled the hole because I did not trust that JB weld. So one thing you got to understand is you do have two holes and you want to make sure this is centered. Now I will be putting red Loctite on these two small screws because I do not ever want to take the chance of these guys backing out in the future. Alright guys, after applying the red Loctite to the machine screw, I did go ahead and install it in the throttle shaft, but I only snugged them up. This way we could rotate the shaft and make sure our blade was centered and there were no obstructions or it was not rubbing in anywhere. Once that was checked, we snugged them on up. And guys, y'all know me by now. Me being me, I went on ahead and used a spring-loaded center punch and staked the back side where these machine screws came through the throttle shaft just for some extra security because I did not want these backing out and ruining this new engine. I made sure that our throttle shaft still moved clean and the throttle blade was still in the bore and not rubbing anywhere just to be safe. So that's going to do this one, and y'all join us next time whenever we install this throttle body on our 417 Motorsports elbow.